The UFC at the White House. Jon Jones out of retirement already? Dan Hooker fights for gender equality. ANZAC's fighting in the UFC this weekend. Let's take a look at the MMA news from the last week with a Squared Up update. What could possibly be more American than a UFC event at the White House? This week, Donald Trump said that they would be hosting a UFC event on the grounds of the White House in 2026. The UFC later confirmed that this was true and they were working towards it, and they were aiming for July 4th, 2026, which would mark the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. With Trump and Dana White being such good friends, to the point where Dana White was on stage at Trump's inauguration, it's really not surprising that something like this is coming together. Conor McGregor, of all people, as he does, has tweeted saying he's keen to be on the card, but we have heard him say stuff like this many times before and nothing has come from it. But I mean, the return of Conor on a UFC White House card, now that's something for the history books. Conor wasn't the only one who voiced interest. Jon Jones also hinted at coming out of retirement to fight on this card, thinking that it would be quite the spectacle and to fight on a card at the White House. Let me know in the comments who you think would make a good matchup for this fight at the White House if it is to happen. Well, Jon Jones' retirement lasted about all of 2 weeks. This week, Jon Jones said he is reportedly back in the testing pool to start fighting again. This actually followed the news of the announcement of the UFC event at the White House in 2026 and his interest to be on that card. Considering Jon Jones did the Trump dance and even presented his what turned out to be his last heavyweight title defense, and only, to Donald Trump after his last win, it doesn't surprise me that potentially fighting at the White House during Trump's presidency is something that makes him want to come back and fight. Do you think Jon Jones' legacy is done and he should stay retired, or are you keen to see him come back and see what he's got left in the tank? Dan Hooker is the fight community's biggest advocate for gender equality. Dan Hooker went viral recently for hosting a open weight MMA gloves 1 minute round 32-man knockout tournament in his backyard. Well, over the weekend, it was the ladies' turn, and this time he had a proper venue. The build-up was a little more low-key this time, and I only knew it was happening because the lawn mowing extraordinaire Oscar Willis from MacLife was in the country mowing Dan's lawns. Judging from who I saw in the videos, you'll either see the full-length video on either MacLife Official or potentially Stylebender as well. And the last video is somewhere up around 750,000 views. Is Dan Hooker onto something with these short round tournaments, or is it just violence for the sake of violence? There was no UFC over the weekend, which only happens about 7 times a year, but we do have UFC this weekend for Lewis versus Teixeira. And we have a couple of ANZACs on this card. It's the return of Jake Matthews. We haven't seen him fight since UFC 312, where he fought in front of a home crowd in Australia, and I believe he is his first fight on his new contract as well. It's also the return of the King of Highbury, Junior the Juggernaut Tuffer, and it's actually his light heavyweight debut, where he is he's cut the pounds and dropped down a weight class, and he's going to be taking on Tuco Tokos. And that name may sound familiar to you because that's actually who Navajo Sterling fought in his debut fight in the same division. And the great thing we know about the Tuffers is when they step into the ring, somebody's getting knocked out. And that's the MMA news for the last week, and now you are all squared up.